Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for spending some time with us today. My name is Sarah, and today we'll be talking with Saket Saurabh, CEO of Nexla, and Boaz Farkash, CPO at Firebolt, about a very exciting topic today, which is data mesh. Saket will be presenting a demo along with Todd Beauchesne, solution architect at Firebolt. At the end of the session, we will open it up for some Q&A, so don't be shy. Go ahead and submit your questions in the chat window, and we'll be sure to address them. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Boaz to kick us off.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are. I'm going to share the agenda right now. We're super excited to be here. I'm here with Saket from Nexla. We'll be talking about data mesh. Saket, how are you?
I'm doing great, Boaz. Good evening to you and good morning to the folks here in the US. What an exciting topic, right, Boaz? I mean, everybody's talking about data mesh. So tell me, what do you think? Why is it such an exciting thing?
Hold your horses. We'll be covering that. I think, it's obvious. Us in the data space, we have to obsess about a new kind of architecture every, let's say, 5 years or so on average. But jokes aside, data mesh is super, super interesting, super exciting. Democratization, decentralization is a topic that keeps sort of coming back and forth as technology changes. But it seems now it's perfect timing to talk about data mesh, and it really holds a lot of potential. And the amount of interest it's been getting out there is really, really spectacular, I would say. So we'll cover the following today. So we'll start talking about what data mesh is. We'll talk about why the timing is actually very right for the data mesh at this point. Data product is something very core to data mesh, so we'll talk about that more in detail. We'll also talk about data mesh and how it essentially opens up new opportunities to take analytics to the next level. And we'll show a demo of data mesh in action, particularly today with sort of a combo of Nexla and Firebolt. And we'll also discuss, try to help you figure out if data mesh is the right thing for you as we get closer to wrapping up. So Saket, you want to start?
Yeah, I think, Boaz, you're right on about what you used the word democratization, right? I mean, the idea that data should be in the hands of users so they can use it and they're not waiting on engineers just makes so much sense. It has always made sense. But I think until now, maybe it was a little bit hard. How do you make that happen? And I think data mesh gives a bit of a framework to do that. It's people, it's tools, it's process, everything coming together. And you're right. I mean, at the center of this concept is a data product, and around that comes together the idea of having governance and ownership and self-service, right? So I would, for our audience here, I'll just lay out the sort of 4 key things of what makes a data mesh. So first of all, data products, something that is ready to use, understands the data, and there's so many sort of capabilities that data products bring in. Okay, we'll look at that. We'll go look at what the data product really looks like as we get deeper into the session. Once you have data products, then how do we get them in the hands of domain owners? The different domains that want to use data. And this is key. This is basically removing the dependence of, let me ask an engineer and they will give me the data, to getting things in your own hands. But then every time we do that, governance comes into picture. You can't really, data is a sensitive thing. So part of the data mesh approach is to have that sort of federated governance. So ease of use, flexibility, democratization, but the responsibility that comes with the democratization, right? And then finally having a self-service platform. That's where we're all headed towards. How can everybody in the company use data and work with data, and self-service is really essential to that. But you said something about timing, all right? Why is it all coming together, Boaz? I mean, it hadn't happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but something is happening right now, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth time spending on what the timing is right for data mesh, before we untangle it a little bit more. So if we look back at the last decade, I mean, it's been an astounding decade for data in the cloud in particular. I mean, so many new technologies and so much more flexibility in how we can work with big data. I think it really has created the perfect grounds for decentralization, which is what data mesh is all about, and for a variety of reasons. First, the simplicity of SaaS and a few other things. So let's start with SaaS. I mean, SaaS did something amazing. Take data warehouses, for example. A decade ago, who would have thought that we would be using data warehouses as a service? Today, we can use any kind of analytics service in the cloud within a few clicks. So it's so much simpler. Simplicity means that your domain owners, your downstream users, in their attempt to get more stuff done, to be more self-serviceable, they can actually get more done. And they can try out new technologies much more easily. Now, couple that with consumption-based pricing, and it's even nicer because there's much less financial risk. Consumption-based pricing allows teams, departments to go after initiatives, data initiatives, with a limited budget, try it out, experiment with it, and if it doesn't work out as expected, there wasn't any yearly license bought in advance. So it opens up things for experimentation. Now, not only that, mixing technologies was never easier. So, if you think about the on-prem days and how software was purchased, different departments didn't necessarily have an easy time getting new products, mixing and matching different products. You wouldn't see companies with multiple warehouses, and suddenly today you see that very often. So in the SaaS era, in the cloud era, imagine you have data in a data lake. You can easily imagine different departments using different services on top of the same data, and this is a big benefit for trying a decentralization movement, trying to give service to different departments to do their own thing. In addition, we also saw a lot of architecture changes in the cloud. The one I like to talk about the most is decoupling of storage and compute. The reason this is so significant for decentralization is that it really allows for reuse of work across departments. So imagine you have a database and it has been well taken care of. It has been sort of tested, validated, a specific team made sure it's correct and helped us gain trust over it. Then, thanks to decoupled storage and compute, you can have completely different users, people, departments, groups, teams running their own workloads over that piece of data, over that database, but in complete isolation, meaning that unlike the on-prem days, these workloads over the same database don't compete for the same resources on that one piece of big server, and don't risk each other's workloads. A specific workload that team A runs doesn't risk the production workload that team B runs on the same database. So it really opens up things for much more flexibility and leveraging what other teams have done sort of in a cross-team fashion. And maybe the final piece is also the abstraction of complexities. So not only is SaaS easy to start with as a service, we've seen things like the challenge associated with scaling up or down, storage management being slowly but surely abstracted. The service providers are doing that behind the scenes for us. This means that as complexities start to we start to say goodbye to them, thanks to the services, it gives more power to the departments, to the teams to do more stuff on their own, to have better chance at democratization because they can get more sophisticated stuff done that in the past, you had to have an engineering team to help out with. Does this make sense, Saket? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it absolutely and totally makes a lot of sense. And I've been seeing some of this in practice, and how we're seeing companies actually benefit, from this sort of an approach and the advancements that you talk about, right? We've seen this across the board. So whether it is a marketing event manager at a LinkedIn, a data analyst at a Bed Bath, or a catalog analyst, account manager at DoorDash, nor a pipeline engineer at Yotpo. I mean, these are all different domains benefiting from the technology advancements that you've talked about, the SaaS, the separation of storage and compute, and then having this concept of data products that they can now, connect and stitch together and actually make data usable, right? So I think the key thing here, again, goes back to that concept of the data product. And I think one of the things that might be helpful here is to just, break it down a little bit. What exactly is a data product, right? Would that help, Boaz?
Yeah, I think data product is a term that sounds great, but confuses a lot of people as well. So let's talk about what data product actually is. You deal with it on a daily basis.
Yeah. So maybe, you and I are both, product people. We have, grown in the product side of the world. So let's just break it down a little bit of what does it mean to have a data product? So let's think about a product as we all understand, think about going to a store, buying shoes, they're the product, right? So when we think about a product, we think of something that's ready to use. I'm looking for something, there is a particular type of a shoe for a particular purpose, fits my size, I like the style. It has been created from raw materials. Somebody put together all the raw materials to make this product. It's ready to use. So there are producers who make a product, the consumers who use the product, and then it has a certain purpose to it, right? So if we take that basic framework of saying what a product actually is, and then we think about data products, I think what we see, this is how I see a data product in the Nexla environment. For example, what it is doing is it's presenting to the user a consistent interface. Instead of thinking about, is it a stream, is it a JSON, is it Parquet, is it an API, is it whatever it is, presents to the user in a consistent interface and says, well, here is the data product. These are the characteristics of it. This is the schema. These are some of the samples. So you can understand what it is. You write your own descriptions to that, so you can decorate that data product. It has access control, so who can use it, who can access it, and then the interesting thing about data products, unlike regular products, is that these data products, first of all, how do they get created? They're auto-generated. We'll show that in a demo. But then they become raw materials to create more data products. How do I take existing data products? I have a data product which has, say, transactions, and then I have a data product that has users. How do we combine that together to create a new data product which combines the properties of both those entities? So the approach of data products is very similar. They are produced by somebody or some system. They get used, but they're ready to use. And what is ready to use as a data product could be an API to a data for someone. We'll look at how getting data into Firebolt makes it ready to use, and we'll look at the analyst and the sort of various use cases that you will present. But that's the whole idea of the data product.
I think it's such an important idea. I think the intuition or the reflex most people have when they run into a new data set or are getting started with a new data initiative is to not trust the data they're looking at, or to just end up with more questions about the data. And if we do that mindset switch and start to think about data as a packaged good, something that's ready to go, something that we enrich with description, schema, and many other things, that helps the user sort of trust what they're looking at and then leverage it for their whatever data initiatives that they have in mind.
Yep, absolutely right. And therefore, the access control, collaboration, governance, all those things become essential elements of the data product. So, as we go to the demo today, I think there are two things that we think about. The two challenges: how do we create and manage these data products, and then how do we use it? Okay, and we'll look at both these parts. As far as the part about creating the data product itself, I will cover that with a demo. Looks busy here in the screen, but the idea is that connect to different type of data systems, observe and understand the data, infer the schema, infer the characteristics, infer the velocity of data, interpret the validations or detect those, and then present a next set is what we call it internally here. But that next set is the data product. It's now packaged. It's ready to use. All the underlying processing of how is the data read, how is it processed, how is it transformed, validated, and so on, is all happening in the background automatically with users able to define that. So we'll be generating these next sets. In the demo today, we'll point to to some data, and we'll do that. And then let me hand it over to you, Boaz. Once the data product comes out of Nexla, how does it become part of the Firebolt system? Oh, you're muted, I think, Boaz.
Okay, thanks. I said so many amazing things. Too bad I have to repeat them. Now, okay, so before we move to Firebolt, because it's not really necessarily about Firebolt, let's stop and think within the data mesh. Why is it exciting? How should we think about what can be done with data in the data mesh setting? So for starters, we said, data mesh is about democratization, decentralization, enablement of teams, of departments, of groups to do more with data. How do we do that? We start by thinking of data as reusable products. We massage it, we take care of it, and we give it to those teams as consumable units. And there's governance, of course. But then the question is, okay, so what can be done with it? And I think that data mesh is a real opportunity to go beyond what we're used to think of traditional analytics. So first, if you find yourself today in a state where you have all these ideas for new data initiatives, but essentially you're blocked because you need help from IT or data engineering or whatever, this is where, first of all, you need to think, wait, maybe if I or my organization adopt data mesh mentality, it will help me unblock my data initiatives. And second, once you have buy-in and are going into that direction, remember that data mesh is a great foundation for experimentation of new data initiatives that can span beyond what you're used to from traditional BI. So you should encourage experimentation with data initiatives. If you're going through this big motion of adopting a new kind of data architecture and mindset, it would be wasted if you don't sort of challenge yourself to think big and experiment with new kinds of analytic deliverables. Now, we talk about self-service in the data mesh as sort of, the end goal to some extent, meaning we put data available and enable self-service. What can be done with self-service? I like to think that we should stretch what we're used to thinking about self-service. Traditionally, self-service in the BI sense has always meant, let's let business users have their freedom to do whatever they need in analytics without being slowed down by a central group or traditionally IT. In the on-prem days, the data warehouse was complex, big. Every change would be essentially a big project. And business users were sort of always blocked by those groups controlling the warehouse, for example. Fast forward to today, we've had multiple sort of waves already in the market where there was self-service analytics took us to new levels. But today it's time to reconsider. I mean, for me, it's not about just business users being able to do more anymore. It's about teams being able to deliver new kinds of much richer analytic experiences. And again, not controlled or not blocked by that central IT team. And the difference is that, whatever domain you're in, whether it's marketing or finance or operations, it's not about necessarily just having businesses. You can dream big. Every domain today can hire data engineers or sort of analytic engineers or sort of to get more firepower to deliver richer analytic experiences. And the reason that can be done is sort of because of all the things mentioned above. I mean, in SaaS with consumption-based pricing and sort of the firepower the modern data stacks brings to the table, once you have data that is readily available and that you trust, you can really do more. So trying to think, how do I go beyond sort of traditional dashboarding, even if you're not an engineering team? Now, one example which we at Firebolt specifically love is what we call data apps. If you look at the analytics space, particular domain you see being sort of really accelerated is data apps. Data apps are typically sort of packaged analytic experiences, not your sort of off-the-shelf generic dashboarding solutions, but rather analytic experiences tailored for a specific purpose. So it's typically for operational experiences internally or for customer-facing experiences, sort of packaged in a consumer-grade experience. And the modern data stack really enables different domain owners to deliver new kinds of experiences. And this is sort of what I think why data mesh is exciting, because with the combination of the modern data stack and the advancements we've seen in data in the last decade, finally is the time where different departments can suddenly deliver a new wave of analytics. Saket, sometimes I feel like I can talk on and on forever, but keep me honest here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's at this point I would say let's show it to the audience here.
Okay.
Let's get it in the hands of the
so,
users so they can
so before we switch to the demo, just a short note on Firebolt. So at Firebolt, we're building a modern cloud data warehouse. But that idea of the data mesh and the opportunity it has of empowering more teams to do much more is what we're specifically about. We care about allowing teams that don't have that heavyweight engineering capacity necessarily to still crunch a lot of data super fast and enjoy those benefits of the modern cloud architectures, like we mentioned before, the decoupled storage and compute and the abstraction of complexities. And today we help developers and modern data engineering teams really deliver those kinds of experiences. So let's switch to the demo, and we'll be showing you a demo of how we start with Nexla and put sort of and create data products, and how that is then handed off to a modern data technology to deliver an analytic product with it.
Right on. Okay. So, very quick sort of overview of what the demo would be. Part A will look at, this use case. Here is an example of a company who is, using advertising today. So we'll look at the advertising auction data feed. There's a lot of data usually comes in through that. We're showing millions or billions of ads. So huge amounts of data. We'll look at how, Nexla connects to that raw data being generated, makes that into a data product. And then, we'll hand it over to the Firebolt team to show how the data gets used. Okay, so let's start straight into the Nexla, UI, where we land you straight into our system here. Okay, hopefully you're able to see. So this is, I have a, within Nexla, you have a concept of flows. And these next sets are the data products we just talked about. Your next sets shared with you a lot of other tools. We'll focus our conversation on this here today. I have a project here which has multiple data flows I've defined in that project. This is what we're looking at. Getting data. In this case, data is being generated in logs in S3. We'll connect to that, add options data. We'll detect a next set, and then we'll do a little bit of verification processing to it minor before it lands into Firebolt. Okay, so let's get started on that. Okay, so first step in creating a data flow, we'll start with creating a source. Again, as we said, there are so many data systems to work with. Nexla helps you connect to any of them. So whether the data is in S3, in FTP, in some APIs, even in email, in your old data lake, in your streams, mainframes, APIs, wherever the data is, simply do two things: point us to the data with the credentials. So we'll start with, in this example, we'll look at Amazon S3, which is a very popular storage where a lot of data gets generated. So we'll connect to this, simply provide the credentials, again, any type of credentials, encryption, and so on, straightforward to set up as in our system here. And I'm just going to use an existing credential to keep this quick and fast. So point to the credential. That's the first step. Now, in spirit of self-service, everything is very intuitive. Once I give the credentials, I can see and browse remotely through my S3 bucket in this case, and start looking at the different folders where I have data. So I'm going to browse through this folder. It has data, and new data will keep coming in. I can set up my my source at any level. So for example, here is some data sets coming in by date, time, there's some archives. I'm going to just choose this whole add options, this whole folder as a source of data in Nexla. Scan it regularly, every day, every 5 minutes, all of that stuff. Any data format, not a problem. I have raw text. In this case, we have text files, but yeah, it's fairly straightforward to do that. I'm going to let it read all the historical data. I'm perfectly fine with a 1x speed for now. We can speed it up later when we come back. So that's pretty much it. Credentials and where the data is. So we're going to connect to that and set up that source of data. Okay. So now is the step where these data products get, generated or auto-detected by the Nexla system. What we are doing is looking through that bucket, all the folders in their files, and seeing where can we find clusters of data. And there you go. We find, some data here. We're going to present that to the user in a nice, simple fashion and say, these are the fields of data that we are seeing. And I can start to simply annotate here. I'll just call this as, auction data. Save that. I have this data that looks familiar to me. I can just call this, from double click. So I have a quick annotation here. A lot of things about data product sharing, collaboration, activity log. I'm not going to get into that. So here is my data product. I'm going to make some quick adjustments to this data product before I'm writing it out. I'm going to take all these attributes on the left-hand side. This is the raw detected data product. I'm going to move them to the right. I'm going to create a new data product. The only modification I would like in this case is something very simple. This date field that is coming in is actually in a different time zone that I want. So I'm just going to do a time zone conversion. I'm going to pick one of these built-in Nexla functions or a UDF. I can define my own functions. I'm going to do a simple time zone conversion. I know this is, US specific time, but I prefer all my data in the warehouse to be in UTC. So we're going to do that simple conversion, apply that change, see that change happen. A quick validation rule, actually. I would like my advertiser ID to always be there. So it's a required attribute. Any other validations I need, but relatively quick changes. And I'm pretty happy with my data. Okay. So this is something that I'm good with. I'm going to save this. This is a new data product I just generated with my converted time zone. I'm actually going to call it add auctions, UTC ready. Okay. I could register it on my catalog, any catalog that I work with, easy to plug that in. And now this data product, like every data product, has a send button. So I'm going to now send this data product into my Firebolt instance. So let's look for many target, we just look for Firebolt as an option, click here. Credentials are already here. You can easily set that up, any kind of configuration that you need, tunneling and so on. But let me just simply point to my Firebolt connection from an existing credential. Okay, well, as we can expect in any live demo, a few gotchas. Actually, this is a credential that was shared with me. So there might be a little bit of a gotcha in connecting to that. So once we connect, it should show up all the different tables that are already in my Firebolt instance, or allow me to create a new one. So let's wait for that to pop up. Hopefully my Firebolt engine is running. Okay. And while that happens, let's just go back quickly to how that view actually looks like. So if I go back here, this is my final target where I connect to my Firebolt instance. I'll show you guys a quick view of what that looks like once we are set up and we edit. So this is what we're expecting. We're expecting to see, yes, this is all my tables in Firebolt. I'm going to point to an existing table in this case. One of the key things here is that if I were to connect it into a new table, I'm able to set up the types that I would like. So I can, Nexla will auto map the types of these fields for my advertiser ID and my ad type ID and all that. It can map it automatically, but I can also choose a specific type if I want to do that, and then choose it as a fact or a dimension table. Those are my choices here. Give it a name, fairly straightforward. Give that a name that I would like, and then save that. And straightforward in, I have my, thing in here. So we will name it advertiser data options, and that's straightforward. We just do that. We end up with creating a flow, and activate this flow. You're good to go. So that's our whole data flow created from ad auctions data, ingesting already into millions or billions of records as we go along, and ready for you. Todd, if you want to take it from here, and let's go into Firebolt where this data is already landing or landed, and we can show how we visualize that.
Thank you, Saket. I'm excited now to be able to show you the Firebolt side of the story. And one thing that I noticed there is that you have the ability to define an index, a primary index on the table as you're creating it in Nexla, and that actually becomes very important on our side. So I'm going to walk you through the Firebolt UI. You're going to get to see a little bit of the UI that we interact with, and then, to be honest, most of our customers are using some kind of a front end. We're going to use Tableau today to look at this data that we've loaded from Nexla. So you can see here a database. When you're looking at any Firebolt instance, you can have one or more databases here. Obviously, since we're working with a partner, they have some testing. Here we have the webinar, and you'll notice that it has two engines. So as Boaz described, engines in Firebolt allow you to separate the workloads. So you can load data and query from the same engine, and that's something that's totally available. But what we're going to want to do today is show you how the data that was loaded by the general purpose engine can be queried by the analytics engine. So I'm going to go in, and this is the SQL worksheet on our side where we can kind of interact. You can see over on the right, you can see the tables that we're working with. Go ahead and expand here and actually zoom a little bit so it's easier to see. You can see the tables that we're working with. Those are the same tables you saw in Nexla during that part of the demo. So you can see all of these. You can actually see the brand new table that was just created. But we're going to look at this advertising historical data because that one was already loaded. I want to show another couple of things. So I can see the tables here, but I don't see a lot of details. I do, if I click on it, I do see the breakdown of the columns. So those columns match the ones that were coming from Nexla. And when I run show tables, what it will add to that is, number one, it's going to show me the primary index. So we kept it very simple using advertiser ID as the primary index for our table. But then you can see actually the syntax, the DDL for creating that. And then you can see the number of rows. So you can see our data auctions. He didn't kick off that process. So the table was created, but the data wasn't loaded. But we loaded 296,000 records into the advertising data, historical data. And that was last time. And again, that was all the records that had an advertising ID. So there were 500,000 total. Nexla filtered it down and then loaded that data. And you can see a little bit about how much size it's taking up and all that there. One other thing I want to point out is that if I ever want to see what queries were being run within an engine, I can run this query history. And it's taking a minute because it's getting this live in real time. It's going to get me all of them. And you notice I'm ordering this table by end time. So the most recently executed queries are going to show up. So this is going to show me all the queries and their how they completed. If I scroll over, you can actually see the query text. So you can see some of the queries that I've been running. But here you can see the create fact table that he ran. And so, you can really see kind of all of the interactivity coming from your source system, so you can track it down and say, how long did it take to load data on the Firebolt side? The other thing then, hey, I'm going to come in here, and this is another example table just to show you, I can run SQL right here. It's going to show me that information, and I can interact with that. I can get a account. What I really want to do now is bring in Tableau and go ahead and connect my Tableau up to my Firebolt. So you've got an empty workbook here in Tableau. We're going to go ahead and go to the connector by Firebolt. The one thing I have to paste in is my password for my credentials. So I'm just using my Firebolt credentials. I've specified an engine. So notice you may have seen I specified the webinar analytics engine. We could have used either engine, and it's going to pull up my tables here. I'm going to just grab the advertising historical data. We're not going to join anything because we haven't built, but this could be, an entire schema that you're bringing in, and you could define the joins. We're going to jump right in here, and I'm going to just organize this by date. And what I want to see is I want to see the total impressions by date, and that quickly. And that's really, when you're working with Tableau, it's very important that things load, because if you're familiar with Tableau, you see a lot of that spinning beach ball, we call it on the Mac, and that means that the data is slow. But here, as we bring in, and let's say, hey, I want to see how the revenue relates to the impressions, see if we're driving more revenue, and it doesn't look like there's really a correlation there. But I can interact with the data. Now, I want to show you guys that this is a pretty small data set we did for the purpose of the webinar. I want to show you guys on a slightly different data set. So going back to my Firebolt, I've got a different instance.
Like also,
Go ahead,
it's in Tableau. It's important to highlight that it's a live connectivity to the warehouse. It's not using Tableau extracts, so we can stay with fresh data.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, every time you drag any element or change anything in Tableau, as Boaz pointed out, it's going to go to the database and refresh. And if those queries are taking 10, 20 seconds, that could be a very bad user experience. So I want to show, we were working with a couple 100,000 rows. Here we have a data set. It's actually 3 tables. We have the LTV, we have the owned apps, and we have the account. And the LTV table alone is 32 billion rows. And so as I pull up my Tableau here, I've got a different workbook set up that is working with this data. And interestingly enough, it's also impression data. So we're very big on ad data. It's a very common thing that we do. But here, if I want to say, monthly is interesting, but hey, I want to see it by quarter. Just takes a second. Now, Tableau can sometimes take a second here to refresh. But the idea being that, we can get, typically all of the actions are going to be instantaneous. And we can even bring in, if we just cancel this one real quick. My Tableau seems to have frozen here for a second, but I think I had another connection going. But just to show, as we work with this, if we want to divide it out, by geo ID, and these IDs don't map to anything, so it's a little tricky in terms of what you're going to see here. But if let's say we remove that, and we want to just see by ad type as another column, see how quickly we get the breakdown. I can go up into my Tableau and interact to, break it down a little bit differently so that we can see the data very quickly and interact with that data. I'm not sure, like I said, I think somehow creating the new connection impacted our other connection, but this definitely gives you an idea of how you can interact with data in Firebolt very quickly and, remove the obstacle of query performance from working with your data and working with your data products.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd. Great demo. Okay, so as we reach, we get closer to the end, let's talk for a couple of minutes of, whether data mesh is right for you or not. Now, I also typically like to challenge common thought a little bit. I think, the common approach today is that data mesh, primarily focused for big enterprises. I mean, which is natural to some extent, because the bigger the company, the more silos you have, and the more tough it is oftentimes to enable democratization while sort of avoiding data chaos altogether. However, it's not just for big enterprises. Going into a data mesh direction, there's no official certification for it. Some of it is a mindset and a process game. And even if you're in the process of sort of building out your data stack and trying to reconsider your principles in which you build your data culture, even if you're in a smaller company, adopting some of the concepts of data mesh will allow you to mature with confidence into a data mesh that is bigger as your company grows. So for example, adopting a data as a product mindset is something that can be very, very meaningful and helpful for companies of any size. It means that you think of data as a package deliverable, something that should be reused by others with confidence. So it's never too early, the way I see it. Now, it also doesn't require a big budget. Yes, we showed you a Nexla product and we showed you Firebolt product, but it's not about one specific product or the other. Essentially, you can start today with anything that you have. You can start small by just applying the right principles and the right processes in place so that people start to do a cultural shift towards thinking about data as a product and to think about self-serve on sort of the end, the other part of the individual departments, and about enabling new data initiatives and thinking about putting the right things in place to enable that. Do I need to hire more people? Also, not necessarily. However, this is where I would encourage you to actually, again, like I said before, think big. Once you reach a state where you feel, okay, I have enabled self-service in a way that's repeatable, I have enabled a data as product kind of thinking and implementation, then it's time sort of to push the boundaries of what you can think different teams can deliver with data. And I wouldn't be afraid of experimenting with sort of heavy data firepower, even with teams that in the past wouldn't do that. So thank you for joining us. We'll open it up for questions now. Saket, you want to start with the first questions?
Yeah, certainly. I don't see a question exactly. Maybe Sarah has the list of questions that are coming through. While I get that, I'm happy to, one of the things, I would say add is that Boaz, every business now is a data business. And every aspect of business, whether it's marketing, recruiting, sales, product, is run by data. So I think the things that you shared about, it's never not too late to start or not too early, to be honest, is absolutely right on. Yeah.
I see.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Saket. We actually are nearing the end of our time, but we do have time for just a couple of questions. So let's see. The first one is, what are the technical requirements for the creators of the data products?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from what I see and I hopefully shared with all of you, creating these data products is meant to be very, very self-serve. As long as, first of all, you have access to the data, because policies and governance are very important. As long as you have access to the data, you can point to us and we do the heavy lifting of creating the first data product. And then creating derivative data products becomes much easier. The whole interface is meant to be easy on one hand. However, just to be clear, there are complex problems to be solved. So we do cover with user-defined functions, snippets of Python and JavaScript, and also APIs and CLI that we offer ways to do more advanced things. So I think the skill levels of users of data within an organization will tend to be more oriented to the application and the business side of data, but there will be experts who will also touch the flow of data, and they should have access to the more powerful tools.
Great, thank you, Saket. And I think we have time for just one last question.
We do have a question in the Q&A.
Okay,
about if you open up data in Firebolt for self-service, how do you manage governance? And so data governance is an important part. Firebolt is a data warehouse. So obviously users are going to want to be able to control how, who has access. And that's definitely something that, we have a number of approaches that manage that, and we're going to continue to evolve that as the product evolves. But we recognize that bringing data into Firebolt so that you can have self-service access does require security, so that you can control who is accessing what data, and it really gives us that power to give the users access.
Great, thank you, Todd. I believe that's all the time we have.
I'm happy to answer one more question that I see here is how is data mesh different from data modeling? And just very, very, very quick answer to that is that, look, the model or the scheme of the data is one of the many raw materials that goes into what is a data product. And, for example, access control of who can use the data, what does the data, how to connect this data product into a system and make it usable, how to generate the pipeline underneath, how to monitor it. So there are many aspects that go in, but model is certainly one of the essential parts of the data product. And then the data product, along with all the governance, management, collaboration, ends up creating this data mesh, which is the framework. This is how the whole company can work around the data product. So hopefully, that helps clarify.
Wonderful. Well, Boaz, Saket, and Todd, thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone for joining and for taking the time. We look forward to seeing you in the next session, and we will be sending a recording of this webinar to all of you. So stand by for that tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thanks.